All right, we're live.
Hello, we're live.
Facebook TV.
Yay!
So we'll just hang out for a little bit as we wait for people.
That's right.
I'll just actually start it on here. I don't actually see any. Usually you can see faces. Mm-hmm. Although I have to remember this conversation, although nobody's watching us now, they'll see this part when they first tune it in
That's
the reruns.
Right. That's right. We'll be good.
Yeah. Excellent. I'm glad you're here, Aaron. So I think number one fan.
Hello.
Aaron.
Hi, Aaron.
And the other person that's always here, his name's Jeff, and Jeff is a great friend of ours. And Jeff does our graphics. Oh. So each week he's created me a new banner for my Facebook page. Mm-hmm. That one there.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and he's an animation person. And so this one was about Valentine's. Next week I got a pink one that's going to be about Pink Shirt Day. So
nice.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us, everyone. We're just waiting to get started here. If you could take a second and share this post with other people, that would be great. So the more people we can have in this conversation, the more comments and conversation, the better these segments are for those of you that have joined us before. And I'm glad to see that, Susan, you're with Jeff this time, and it's not just Jeff hijacking your account and pretending that he's Susan. So don't worry, Jeff. You don't even have to ask your question. We'll talk about the arts later on. 5 episodes, same question.
Yeah.
And Sean, thanks for joining us. What are we doing to promote more arts in our community? Sometimes why doesn't arts get the same funding as sport in the community?
Right.
And that sort of thing.
Well, today's about art.
Yeah.
The art of writing.
Yeah. So I'll just open up this portion here because I can see the questions over here. Oh, I gotta. Thanks for sharing, Aaron. Okay, why don't we start? I'll just jump over to this. So I'm really thrilled. So as I think probably everybody knows, because it's so well advertised, this is Black History Month.
Yeah.
And it's an important time for us as Canadians, but frankly all over the world, to celebrate our history and our diversity and share stories and talk about that. So I'm really thrilled tonight to have Yabome with us, who's a great Port Coquitlam resident and engaged in our community. And Yabome just wrote a book. I'll hold it a little closer. We're going to promote this a little bit more later on. It's hard to see there, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's called Identities, a short story collection. But we're going to talk about this a little bit later on. So I'm just going to read a little bit about your qualifications, which are sensational. And we're really lucky not only to have you with us on MayorTV, but also to be a part of our community.
Thank you.
So you're born in Germany, grew up in Sierra Leone, which we're going to talk about a little bit, which is in West Africa, completed her undergraduate and graduate studies in Canada and the United States. She is a social scientist, writer, facilitator, curator of African identity and leadership stories. You hold a doctorate in human and organizational development. She works, teaches, speaks, writes, and does research in the field of leadership and organizational development and social change, especially related to Africa. You're married and you have 3 children, and I know you're part of our community and part of we go to church together and all this great stuff. So again, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation tonight. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for having me. I don't know about great citizen of Port Coquitlam, but I'll take citizen of Port Coquitlam. It's great to be here. Yeah.
Maybe others will judge. I don't know.
That's right. That's okay. Yeah.
And so everybody that's just joined us or is continuing to join us, thank you for joining us. Please make sure you share this post with others so others can start to contribute and participate and watch what's going on. Use your emojis to like things. Use your happy face. If you use the angry face, I'm not sure. We'll ignore those ones, I guess. But anyways, please use those. It helps also with our Facebook analytics to ensure that Facebook pumps this up on people's walls so that more and more people can see this and participate in our conversation. So having said that, we'll start off with just a general conversation about Black History Month. And we were chatting earlier, and I was doing some research today about BC and the history of Black people coming to BC. And I was really, it shouldn't have surprised me, but it did surprise me a little bit when it seems like a lot of BC, we had the Hudson's Bay Company coming across Canada, but we had the gold rush coming up from California. And that's that's where we really saw a lot of black people from California migrating up to the Fraser River and the gold rush and that sort of thing. And I know you were talking about the East Coast and how it's a different story on the East Coast.
Yeah. And that story on the East Coast is connected to the other place that I'm from, my African country, Sierra Leone. And the history there is that when in the late 1700s, early 1800s, when slavery was being abolished, black people from the U.S. came up to Nova Scotia in Canada. And eventually, because of hardships and some trouble settling, etc., a big chunk of those, I think about half of them, decided to go back, said they wanted to go back to Africa. But of course, at that point, there was no telling where people had originally been taken from as slaves, and this was the next generation and the next generation. And so how the British solved that was by buying the plot of land called Freetown in Sierra Leone.
So the British bought that?
Yes.
Was Sierra Leone a colony?
Yes.
Because all Africa, between the French and the Spanish and the British, they kind of colonized a lot of it. So
that's right. Sierra Leone ended up being a British colony.
Okay.
And was called Freetown and the Protectorate. With all of that is Sierra Leone today. But Freetown was where the repatriated slaves were taken. So some from Nova Scotia, some that were apprehended on the high seas when the slave trade was abolished, but slaves were still, traders were still trying to take slaves out. Those ships were apprehended, and the slaves that were people who were taken, who were supposed to become slaves, were taken back to Freetown as well. So became a mix of many different West African peoples settling in Freetown.
And is that still today, that almost multicultural dynamics?
Yes, absolutely. So there's the heritage of the people, the group of people that were descendants of freed slaves became the Creole people, as we know today. My husband is a Creole, so I'm proudly connected to that heritage as well. And my family background was from the indigenous Sierra Leoneans that were there when the British brought the repatriated slaves. And so on my family side, that's our history. So there was that mix, and at the end of the day, people who've traced back to Nigeria, to Ghana, to different places originally. So it is a very, in terms of heritage, a very multicultural city.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in North America, because we call people that descend from Africa, we say they're from Africa, but it's a continent.
It's a continent,
right? I think a lot of
countries.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people, they don't think of it as one country, but they kind of do. I think there's a blurring of the lines, and until you actually do more reading or go there, you'll realize how multicultural Africa is.
Absolutely.
Aaron and I went to Morocco a couple of years ago, and I had been to Dakar before, and this was our first time together to Morocco. We weren't sure what to expect, but it was Middle Eastern.
Yes.
It wasn't what you would traditionally think Africa to be when you say someone's from Africa, right? So it's, and I know Africa is also, as a continent, is really starting to participate greatly on the global stage.
Absolutely.
And I think that will also highlight the differences. So back to Black History Month here, just to further the conversation about the West Coast side of it. So, many people, including Black people, came from California up for the gold rush. But one of the things that was interesting was not only were they coming up for jobs and money, they were, even though they had either left slavery or they were freed from slavery and went to the West Coast, they still weren't allowed to be American citizens. And so they wanted to leave the U.S. and come to Canada so that they could actually become citizens of a country. And Canada was open, welcome. We're the U.S. ended, born on immigration. But as I said, that it's kind of ironic that Yeah, what's happening today?
Kind of
Isn't
repeat,
it?
Yes.
You've got Canada that's got the doors wide open to immigration and refugees. You got, frankly, people walking across the U.S. border, Canada border to come here.
That's right.
Wow.
Pretty ironic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Similar story for sure.
Interesting.
Right now. Yeah.
So one of the things in my research, I thought, and maybe you can add to it because I know I feel so naive in this conversation sitting beside you who knows so much about this. So
I know this much. There's so much to know.
Yeah, well, there's this much to know. You know this much. I know about that much. So it's all perspective.
That's right.
But I thought, there's a few different names that I think people know in the Metro Vancouver area. And so I knew the names, I knew a little bit of the history, but I thought it would be interesting to have some of those conversations. And one of the older names is Joe Forte. And people might know Joe Forte because of the restaurant now, right? A very famous seafood restaurant. Yeah. And many people will know the bandstand and the Joe Forte. But his influence in Vancouver and family life, and I didn't realize this. I thought he was just part of but he was an employee of the city of Vancouver in 1900. Right. And so for anybody that doesn't know, Joe Forte was this black man. He immigrated here from the U.S., and he worked for the city of Vancouver, I guess, in Parks and Rec, and basically was the ambassador, taught kids to swim, programs of English Bay. And that's why he's such an influence. There's a plaque, a historical site down there, and the pictures of him, he was a big guy, but he was wearing the one-piece bathing suit like everybody wore at that time. Right, but it just looks so classic, right? Yeah. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting story. Yeah. And then Rosemary Brown, 1950, who helped found the British Columbia Association for the... Sorry, the cleaner just came in. I need to put a sign on the outside of the door next time. So Rosemary Brown, 1950, helped the founder of the British Columbia Association of the Advancements of Colored People. Now, is that association still around? Or has it kind of evolved into different programs? I believe it is,
and there's a lot of different associations now as well that are supporting different aspects of promoting Black history, and a lot of work that's being done also down with the city of Vancouver and looking at one of the things that might be interesting is the work that's going on to reclaim the place in Vancouver that's thought to be where people of African descent settled, where the viaduct is in Vancouver. And the city of Vancouver is looking at that because there's different groups working in Black history and Black heritage to ask for that plot of land to be reclaimed, because apparently when the viaduct was built, that community disseminated, and so some of that is also being done right now by current sort of groups. Yeah,
because when you look at historically immigration patterns, people of a certain nationality they'll gravitate together, right? We've got lots of Chinese people live in Richmond, we have Little Italy, we have Chinatown, we have a North Road, a Korean established community. It's just natural. Yeah. And I guess if I was immigrating to another country, especially if I didn't know the language, I would look for probably that were Canadian that I could then have a chat with, and they could tell me where the good restaurants are, where the immigration office is, and all that sort of stuff. So I didn't realize that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I believe it's the Georgia Viaduct where it is that... it used to be, I believe it's Africville, but I might have that.
Oh, really?
But that whole community is, and there's a lot of work to sort of reclaim that and have it as an African heritage site or community or something. Yeah.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah.
The other name that when I was doing there were so many names to go over, but one of the ones that I remember as a young person was Emery Barnes, who was the first Black member of the Legislative Assembly here in British Columbia. Yeah. And he was also one of those larger-than-life people, an athlete when he was younger, but, a tall guy. And I just remember being young, and for whatever reason, whatever positions he took, I don't even know what political stripe he was, but he was always out there in his positions. And I remember, I think he was probably one of the first people that I can remember that did a living for a month on the streets for what someone gets welfare.
Right.
And I remember, I still remember this was back in the early 80s. I was maybe a teenager. And him, the story was, part of the story was he could afford one newspaper a week just to be caught up on the news. But it highlighted people that are living on the streets or on welfare don't have the ability to actually keep up on current events.
Right.
And it really, like a small thing that we would probably just take for granted, or take for granted, but when, and it's just enlightening. And here, you know, I was, like I said, an early teenager,
right,
and it still stuck with me. Yeah.
And along those lines, one person maybe to highlight as well is Jane Austen, who apparently was also in government and was the person who advocated, she may have been the first black woman.
Oh, really?
In government, and she advocated for moving Black History from a week, because it used to be a week in February, to the month.
Right.
And you know, it's always that relationship for me with Black History Month around, you know, the fact that there's a need to highlight it speaks to some of the challenges behind it. So I'm always kind of like, you have a bit of mixed feelings towards it, and at the same time recognize that socially and structurally, with all of the historical issues and ways in which people of African descent have been marginalized, that a focus on it, sort of like how we are paying a lot more attention now in Canada to First Nations as well. Yeah. There's something about just honoring and highlighting our histories that makes a difference, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, and you start to hear the too much politically correct, or where's that line to your statement about do we need to highlight something or not? And you know, I think sort of like you had just said that let's just celebrate it all. Yeah. Right. Instead of just saying, hey, you know what, this time of year is for Christians or Jews or Muslims or African or English, or who cares? First Nations. Let's just celebrate it all. And I think that's one of the beauties of Canada, is that we do want to celebrate it all instead of just fit ourselves into a box, which I think some of our neighbors down south do a little too much. And when you get in a situation like they are now, it's tough to look outside of that box. Right? Whereas, like, one of the things that really struck me was when we had and I've talked about it on my show a couple times, is the tragedy that happened in Quebec City 10 days ago. The outpouring of love and support across this country, before anybody knew who did it or why they did it or anything, it was just, that was almost secondary, that our fellow Canadians, our brothers and sisters, are in pain, and we all came together. And I think there's a lot to what we're just talking about here, is celebrating Black History Month, or celebrating some other history, some nationality, some culture, all together. And just because it's Black History Month doesn't mean that there can't be another week in there or another time. It's not, well, it's all carved out, nobody else can do anything in that month.
Well, exactly.
It's together.
I think what I like about what you just said was the acknowledgement that, you know, what you described about celebrating it all, that's where we want to go. And yes, in Canada we may be further along on that, but we also have a ways to go. And in the meantime, that's almost why we do have the need to focus in chunks, but keep, like, at the same time that we keep widening that box and not like staying in the lines at all. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that is important about this is that political correctness. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So we're in Black History Month. Yeah. I think people that aren't black don't want to say the wrong thing. Right? Like, is it okay to say African Americans, African Canadians, black people, right? Right. Yeah. And you do it out of respect. And I think it's same with First Nations. And I think it's same with Muslims and Jews and a whole bunch. You want to be correct and polite because we're Canadians.
Yes. Yes.
So sometimes you don't even venture into a conversation because you don't want to step on someone's toes.
Yeah.
But when you get to know people really well, they're like, it doesn't bother us. I'd rather you ask questions and be politically incorrect, because then I can at least help you understand what's going on. Yeah,
and that is exactly a bit of the unfortunate side of things right now, is that we all, myself included, are on tenterhooks because of just the political environment and everything that's going on right now around the world, not just down south. So, there's a place where, for me, my advocacy is just being in the conversation and being in relationship with people. Because at the end of the day, no matter who you are, you can really sense intent from people. Even without words, the way questions are asked, the way people engage with you, that respect makes a difference. And you're right. I think in Canada, sort of the subtle ways that difference is either acknowledged or not acknowledged also plays into whether people feel included or not. Yeah. I know that, and I know that we're coming to the book, but one of the things just from my academic life is more and more research and more the evidence showing that sort of the subtle ways, the micro ways in which people feel included or excluded are as impactful as sort of the macro institutional structural ways. So I'm sure people might have heard the term microaggression is floating around. And I think sometimes in Canada we run the risk of that quite a bit because, in being PC, politically correct, and not wanting to say the right thing and being too polite, sometimes, questions can be asked, in sort of trying so hard to be polite that you end up actually causing offense. Right. And so these micro ways that we relate to each other matter just as much as the structural issues, for sure. For sure.
And I've also found that humor helps.
Absolutely.
In breaking some of those barriers down and just making a conversation more relaxing. Yeah. Right? Yeah. That you can say something incorrect in a loving way and laugh at it.
And if you're in relationship with the people that you're, tripping over yourself with, they'll be okay. Yeah. The big thing is like just getting to know people and connecting with people as people.
And have the
regardless. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We all I put my foot in my mouth too. It's not like I'm exempt from this just because I'm a Black woman, right? So it really is about building relationships with people that are respectful and where you can say, I don't really know about this. Yeah. And, the difference between, I always joke about the can I touch your hair conversation. Like the difference between someone...
I don't have any hair.
You
were talking to me.
No. That's funny. There you go. So, I always joke about someone at the mall randomly or coming up and saying, oh, how do you wash your hair? Yeah. And, in African and Black communities, we have this conversation about who asks a stranger hygiene questions. Yeah. Or can I touch your kid's hair? And that just makes me cringe. Like, don't do that. I don't know you. And at the same time, I have friends that we will sit around talking about Black hair and how I braid my hair or don't braid it or how I get it to look the way it is. And I'm not offended at all. The difference is that I'm in relationship with those people and they at least know me and know a bit about me before they start asking personal questions.
So it's funny you bring up hair.
Oh no.
So as someone that hasn't had hair since grade 1.
Oh no. That long hair?
Yeah, that long. I have the exact same experience as you. Right. Strangers will come up. They're not as much anymore. Yeah. But when I was growing up and want to touch my head. Yes. Or want to ask me questions. Or make assumptions. Or ask, how do you wash your head? I'm like, ivory soap? I'm like, there's not special... Yeah. It's so funny that you mentioned that.
Yeah. So the difference there being they're not used to seeing
and I would be so put off by it. I'm like, really? That's
Yes.
your question? Whereas my friends, whatever.
Right. So that
Whacking me upside the head, never mind.
exactly. So that experience, imagine that
Yeah.
fairly frequently, multiple times a day.
Really?
I said in a talk I gave about the first story in this book, Where You From, I talked about how someone had said to me, maybe it's because you have a bit of an accent. Maybe that's why people ask. I just sort of took that in for a moment and thought, okay, but my 9-year-old daughter that was born here has already come home asking me, what do I respond when people ask me where am I from?
Yeah.
And I asked my nephews, my sister Masu, her kids, sort of while I was working on that paper and sort of doing the research for it, I just randomly asked them, do you get asked where you're from? And they didn't even skip a beat. They didn't ask me to explain the question. They're like, all the time.
Really?
I just choose, when I say Sierra Leone and when I say Canada. So there is a thing about how people respond to difference, trying to connect, but create disconnection and create maybe amplifying the difference instead of like unifying. And to what you said, I talk about even the book, the reason I called it Identities and not African Identities, because identity matters to all of us. And at the core, when you said about being a child who didn't have hair and got asked about that, at some point we've all had marginal experiences and we know how that feels. And so if you think about that for peoples of African descent who get that every day, all the time, continually, it is something that you just sort of develop your own persona, identity around, and just find your way in. Otherwise it can sort of consume you.
No, for sure. I know we're going to get on to your book here in a second, but I find this so fascinating because as a kid that grew up with no hair, right? As you know, growing up, if you're different in one iota, and it's, next week's anti-bullying week, right? And if you're different in one little aspect, you kind of get picked on or asked questions or called names or that sort of thing. And you do sort of develop a coping mechanism with it. And so, much like you, obviously growing up as a black person, having that experience, I grew up as the tallest kid in the class with no hair.
Well, my right? Experience.
And then going to, you got comfortable, you'd be in elementary school, and you got through the first few grades, and then everybody kind of became your friend. And then you're just one of everyone else and all that. Then you got to go to middle school, and you got to start it all over again. And then you got to go to high school and start it all over again. And so it was this perpetual. And what's interesting is I never understood why I was going through this, right? And our faith helps me understand this. Then I get into politics. Seriously, I get into politics. For everybody who's watching this, it's getting a little personal all of a sudden.
We didn't plan this.
Just forgetting that you guys are here. I hope you're enjoying this. But you get into politics, and now I don't want to blend in. I want to stick out. So when I walk into a room, I think it's great that people know that the mayor is here now. The presence of the mayor, the city is now here, sort of thing, because so much comes with that. You don't want to blend in. So, for the first 37 years or whatever, like, why do I have no hair? This is really odd. And then I become mayor. I'm like, now it makes sense.
Yes.
And I developed that thicker skin, frankly being called names my whole life, or walking into an establishment and people going, what's with the guy? You probably experience this with people pointing when you walk into places, not because they know you, because you look different. And but then when I got to this role, it was like, okay, now I want people to go, hey, he's here.
Well, you brought up two things quickly that I want to highlight. And it's funny you said about people staring because you're different. I have an old boss, and I never used to know whether I should laugh when she said this or cry. But she used to joke that her favorite thing was we'd go to do these, fairly high-profile leadership meetings or whatever. And she's like, I just loved it when you'd show up beside me and, I can watch people's faces and watch all the assumptions happen. And then I introduce you and you stand up and you do your thing and I watch their faces changing as the assumptions assumptions get like blown away, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing or something I should be sad about.
Could go either way.
It could go either way. But I wanted to, in what you were saying just now, two things. I think what this conversation is highlighting, and again, we didn't intend this, is so my human development hat is going on right now. That humanity, we're created to see difference, and this is not a bad thing.
Right.
And we should see difference. Like so the sort of tension here is, for me, these conversations are about, don't see me, don't talk to me, don't only talk to me like this in these prescribed ways. It's our diversity can be and is our strength. There's a reason God made us all different. So seeing difference is part of what we do because we categorize in our brains. That's how our brains work. The issue is how we respond to and how we engage to people in whatever differences we see. Right. And as you're pointing out, we all at some level have had marginalized experiences. It's just some people end up having more of it over their lives depending on what the circumstances are. So just to say that. And the other thing is, again, sort of highlighting that same point, this is not just about being a Black African person in the West. Right now, again, the difference of going back to Sierra Leone as a child. I was born in Germany, and going back to Sierra Leone as a child and probably speaking English with a European accent. Now, Sierra Leone was a British colony, and so all of our education was in English. But I was, in quote, different. And so in elementary school, there were those moments where someone said whatever or someone tried to bully me. But I always joke about they found out what I was made of really quickly. Because I've always had a voice. Let's just put it that way. So
well, and you have like 10 siblings, but you've got a large family. Might as well, yeah. Well, now with all the spouses, but you have a large family that was kind of, I'm sure, growing up always there with each other.
And phenomenal parents. I now that I think about it now, like all families, it's not like we didn't have our own issues. Sure. Every family has their own things, but phenomenal parents and parents that told us, especially being an African girl, and that we were 6 girls. There was no, you don't do this because you're a girl and only your brothers get to do that. There was none of that. I think our father thought we could go to the moon if we wanted, and our mom is just like, yeah, you can do it. Yeah. I often joke, people are like, how do you do everything you do? I'm like, and if I'm having a moment where I'm complaining to my mom, she's the mom who goes, yeah, you start complaining and you think about it and realize she did her master's when she had me, and I'm baby number 8. Exactly. Wow. Exactly, right? Yeah. And then she kept working and doing all these phenomenal things all those years with all those kids. And so, I'll have my meltdown moment and she'll start chuckling. I'm like, I know, don't say anything. I know I can do it. I just need to have my moment. Yeah.
I feel like we all do. So we talked a little bit, but let's talk about your book. So Identities.
Yes.
A short story collection, and maybe you can tell us a little bit what brought you to write this book and bring together these different there's a common theme through all the stories.
That's right.
But stories from different people together.
So this book is, I call it a short story collection about global African experiences. So I think the thread in there is a little bit what you were talking about, going to Morocco and being surprised about this is Africa too. And, in this book, I highlight everything from, there's generations of Indian Africans. And with everything going on in the Middle East now, before there was a migration of Middle Eastern Africans, not just to North Africa, but across the continent, right? So in West Africa, in East Africa, and across the board. And then there's, the Africans that are migrating all over the world or born elsewhere to parents of African heritage or who have now immigrated out that sort of collect different identities along the way. And I think, when you move around and you sort of become that global citizen, it's difficult then to be just from one place or to be just one thing. And there's so many assumptions and presuppositions about what and who is African. For me, this collection was about just sharing multiple and different perspectives, and not even this doesn't even scratch the surface of what it means to be African and who is African and all of the different kinds of African experiences that are possible, and there's myriads of them. As you've said, language groups, people groups, so many across the continent in 54 countries. Like, I haven't even scratched the surface with this.
So is this book one?
There'll be more. There'll be more. Absolutely. I definitely intend to write more and to continue writing. I am writing right now, but more a professional book that I sort of put on hold when I kept feeling the urge to complete writing these shorts. So once I'm done with some professional writing this year, I intend to come back to continue writing creatively. But to that point, the reason I went with writing creatively and what motivated me, I think you asked a little bit about that earlier, was because I have been writing academically and have peer-reviewed stuff published in my field, leadership and organization development. But I have started sort of crossing over to social change and African leadership and doing some research and writing in that area. And I did this big research project for my dissertation on post-traumatic growth experiences of African immigrants and refugees that I keep working on and things like that. So in that crossover, as I was presenting at different conferences, some of this work, I just remember thinking, this needs to be a broader conversation than just within academia. It needs to be a conversation in in our everyday circumstances, around the coffee table, around the dinner table, a way that multiple people and diverse people can have these conversations, and a way to open up some of the myths and assumptions, and maybe not assumptions, of what it means to be African today in the world. So I went creatively because I wanted a way to share those stories without, and to do it lightly. Maybe a bit of what you said about humor, right? To do it lightly.
And so if someone was to get this book, will this trigger those conversations, do you think?
I hope so. I think so. That's what I've heard from people who've been reading it. I've had a couple of people that are like, I want to go for coffee with you. There's a couple of things that really hit home for me, or a couple of things I didn't know about. And this is across the board, right? This is not like a Black African thing. I've had dear colleagues that are Canadian, that are white Americans say, I want to talk to you more about some of the things I read. And, it really helped me understand this thing or that thing. So the intent really is to open conversation, and I think it's doing that. I hope so.
Yeah, that would be great. It would be great to get this in high school or middle school kids' hands, or teachers to teach from this book too. Well,
I am noticing a trend in people in education and in the diversity space that are sort of starting to have conversations with me. So I don't know. I'm thinking about a companion discussion guide for it as well.
That's a good idea.
In that vein,
people could choose this as their book club book.
Yes, absolutely.
Erin?
Hi, Erin.
Maybe you could have a guest speaker. Just lives around the corner.
And I'm also doing a blog series on the book as well, right? So I just did the first one earlier this month. I'll post another one this week, at some point this week, on each of the stories. I'm doing a blog series. So, I'll compile those at the end and throw in some questions. And definitely there's a lot here for conversation.
And so what's your website?
It is sldconsulting.org. So SLD, like supporting learning development, consulting.org.
Excellent. Erin just said great idea.
Yay! So on that website there's a blog post series, and if people, I'm on Facebook, at Yabome Writer, on my writers page. I always post the blogs there as well. Okay.
And at the end of this, we'll write comments in our comment section with all of the links to everything, where we can get everything.
You
can
see
your
family. Honestly,
I was looking at
kids
that, I'm
just agreed. Grandma is awesome. Yes, she is.
I know. I was looking on my iPad here about the comments are coming in. I'm like, it's the family. And so you can buy this book at Amazon?
Yes, it is on Amazon.com, and like the other Amazon outlets have it as well now, I'm hearing. And so Amazon.com, if you search identities and Yabome, it comes right up.
Yeah, and we'll put a link right to it on our site here.
Okay, great. It's on Kindle as well.
Yeah, so, I saw that.
Paperback on Kindle. And for local Vancouverites, Tri-City folks, it is at Chapters Pine Tree Village in Coquitlam. It's at Chapters Metrotown and Indigo Vancouver.
Excellent.
Indigo
is it in our library?
I think. Not yet. Should get it in there.
I know some people.
Yeah.
That'd be great to get in the library too, right?
Absolutely, yeah, it would be great. I know that my grad school in the U.S. has a copy and they're profiling alumni readers. And did you go to Simon Fraser? I think I remember this.
Yeah.
You did. So Simon Fraser University also has an author series for alumni, and I just got invited to the one in March. So.
Nice.
I might end up at SFU as well. So.
I see that someone... So we have to look forward because I can't get here. Tammy said, I bought it at the Coquitlam chapters. Excellent. Thanks, Tammy.
Yay. Thank you,
Tammy, have you read any of it yet?
She's read it. She told me she's read it. Yeah.
Yeah, was it... Maybe she'll write some comments there.
Tell us how it was for you.
Give us some happy faces and stuff. So, and you had a book reading. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, well, it was. We called it a book launch celebration because the book actually launched in December online, right? Online, right?
Yeah,
Amazon and social media, etc. But on the weekend was just an opportunity to bring people together locally, friends and family. All of you who came, yay! Thank you. That was so much fun, and we had a bit of a book reading, as you know. Thank you for being there as well. And Yvonne Couchet,
had a great time.
Thank you. Erin and I didn't get to say hi, but thanks for coming. And Yvonne Couchet was a phenomenal singer, isn't she so great?
Oh my goodness.
And my nephew Adeyemi, whose story and experience motivated when I became a black man, story in the book, did his thing as well, spoken word / song. It was great. It was a good time. I enjoyed myself.
Oh yeah, you looked like you enjoyed yourself. It was great to be there. Erin and I, we were at an event before that, and then we came to your event, so we were a little bit late, but we caught just the tail end of your reading and the other stuff. So it was great. But you have another one coming up.
Yes, I am doing a book signing at Chapters Pine Tree Village in Coquitlam on Saturday, February 18th at 1 p.m. So those of you in the Tri-Cities, those of you in Vancouver, please come out again and support me. I'll be there signing books for anybody who walks through the Chapters Coquitlam doors that day.
Excellent. Gotta like that. And Tammy wrote that she loved it.
Yay! Yeah, I can just see it now. Thank you.
So I'm going to kind of wrap up here. Is there anything else? There's on the Black History Month. You just Google Black History Month and maybe Black History Month British Columbia. Yeah. So you get art. There is a lot of events going on. That is a lot.
And you know what? A friend of mine who's also on, I'm also on the Mayor of Vancouver's committee, advisory committee for Black History Month.
Gregor?
Yes. And a friend of mine.
I'll talk to him tomorrow. Okay.
Yay.
See you. For you.
Okay, good. A friend of mine on that committee just sent me a link. She has taken it on to just try to collate all, like as many as she can find, events that are happening in Vancouver. She has a really long list. I'll send it to you if we can post it as well.
We'll post it here as well.
It's a really long list and there's lots going on.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much.
This was such a great conversation.
I know.
I'm glad we got to share it with a whole bunch of people as well.
We let some skeletons out in public.
I think that's one of the great things about this format is having real conversations with you and I, real Port Coquitlam people, talking about whether it's local issues or global issues, that sort of thing. So thank you so much for being a part of this.
My pleasure.
Okay, so just a couple of community things that I want to update folks on. We're having our annual volunteer awards, and so if you want to nominate a volunteer in Port Coquitlam that's done an incredible job making life better, we have different categories: arts, heritage, and cultural awareness, caring and safety, environmental protection and enhancement, sport and recreation, youth programs, U21, so people under the age of 21, as well as a lifetime volunteer. So you can go onto our website. We've got those brochures at all of our city facilities, as well as at the library. Please take a moment to nominate someone around. Also, this week is February 17th is Healthy Heartathon. So around Port Coquitlam, there is going to be a lot of activities going on to try to raise awareness about being healthy. There's after-school basketball tournaments, after-school programs. There's a 4th annual Stroke Heart Swimathon, which they asked me to be a part of, and I'm like, I sink, so that wouldn't be good. So, do you? Yeah. So I'm going to run, which is okay. So check that out, portcoquitlam.ca/healthy heart, and you can get all the information about that. And last but not least, I think every week I've brought it up, is the new rec center. And we've talked about that it's going to get built soon. We're going to break the ground soon, in fact, in March. But there's a couple important dates that if you really want to come out and have a conversation with the builders, with our city staff, with some of us politicians, we're going to have a public open house on February 27th. That's from 2 to 7:30 at the rec center at Wilson Center. So a public open house on February 27th. We'll have the boards up, what it's going to look like inside, outside, the construction schedule, all that sort of stuff. So please come out to that. And we'll have one specifically for the seniors. So we'll have one at the Wilson Center. We'll have a coffee chat on February 20th from 10 a.m. to noon, specifically at the Wilson Center, to chat with our seniors about the construction time and how things are going to change during the construction period and what the facility will look like at the end of the day. So there we go. Lots going on in town. And I know there's a ton of other stuff. There's a arts, Jeff, maybe you're not watching, Jeff, because I think there's an arts committee meeting, not committee, but community gathering meeting next door tonight. There's next week is Pink Shirt Day. So next Wednesday, I think we're going to do MayorTV from the youth all ages dinner at the Wilson Center. So that'll be kind of neat. Maybe we'll have some youth on there and some other community groups. And I got my pink shirt on the desk, which is great. So you'll see us out for that. So again, Yabome, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Please take this video, share it with a whole bunch of people.
Share.
Join the conversation after this. We'll continue to answer questions and make our community a better place.
That's right.
Thanks.
Thank you.